Inquisitor Grendel dispatches a team of misfits and rejects to the Hive City Tertium to reclaim an ancient piece of archeotech reported to allow warp travel without a navigator. What the Inquisitor presents as a fairly routine reclamation mission turns far, far deadlier than expected, and it's possible that billions of lives will hang in the balance. At least that's the premise of Warhammer 40,000 Roleplay Wrath and Glory Darktide Extraction from Cubicle 7 Games. And I'll have my review right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'll be sharing my review of Warhammer 40,000 Roleplay Wrath and Glory Darktide Extraction from Cubicle 7 Games. This is written by Callum Collins, Michael Duxbury, Chris Edwards, Chris Handley, Ciaran O'Brien, and Sven Truggenrolt. Hopefully I've come close to pronouncing all those names correctly. Probably not, but I did try. The 112-page hardcover with PDF is available right now. It does carry an MSRP of $34.99. If you want to grab just the PDF alone, you can do so over at DriveThruRPG for $19.99. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Darktide Extraction. And that is how I will be referring to this book from here on out, because Warhammer 40,000 Roleplay Wrath and Glory Darktide Extraction does not roll off the tongue. It's a bit of a mouthful. So, a few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Cubicle 7 Games were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside. And then lastly, this is an adventure. So if you're a player and your game master has picked up Darktide Extraction, maybe they just haven't started running it yet, maybe they're talking about picking this up, keep in mind there are spoilers ahead. So I'm going to let you know right up front. Of course, if your game master has been kicking around picking up this adventure, let them know about this review. That way they can approach Darktide Extraction and make a far more informed buying decision. First thing we're going to do is take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks work very hard to bring this to life, so let's give credit where credit is due. Before I start detailing this adventure, I do want to let you know I am by far not some Warhammer 40K historian by any stretch of the imagination. I had about the first 4 editions of the miniatures rules, splat books, minis, and so forth. But for at least the last decade, I've got my Warhammer 40K fix by way of role-playing games. Just want to let you know in case I happen to mispronounce something as we're going along. I'm also not overly familiar with the video game Darktide. I do know the story in that. I haven't played it. I just want to be very upfront. So this is a 5-part adventure, and the player characters are dispatched to retrieve this ancient device, which is supposedly going to allow starships to travel through the warp without a navigator. So something that's a really big deal. Now, of course, the player characters aren't the first team dispatched to retrieve this, and it's possible they won't be the last either. So we're going to start off with some information about the planets as well as the Hive City. The vast majority of the action is going to take place as the team is descending what's known as the Snake Stack, and they are using a massive cargo elevator to do so. Now, one of the really cool things about this cargo elevator is so huge, right? This is a hive city. So this is all massive. There's billions and billions of people who just live in the city itself. So the cargo elevator is so large that a community has grown underneath it. It's called the Slung. And it's a city, town, I guess we'll say, that is developed under the cargo elevators. So there's all these cargo containers and bridges and walkways and things like that that are hanging underneath the cargo elevator. I thought that was really cool. I think that is a really nice wrinkle to this adventure. Really becomes a home base for your team of player characters. We're going to start off with, once again, some information about the world in the city and this snake stack. Then we're going to get into some random tables here. These are hazards and bounties, and they are broken up by area because there's a lot of different areas that the cargo elevator is going to traverse as it's descending down the snake stack. So we've got areas like gang turf and so forth. Now, there are 5 parts to this adventure. Each of those chapters will have encounters where the game master is referred back to these tables, and it'll tell you, okay, use this hazard, use this bounty. There are a lot of different ways for the player characters to improve their reputation with the people of the Slung, and also ways for them to gather more equipment to be able to improve the defenses of the Slung of the cargo elevator. So there's a little bit of an aspect of base building with the cargo elevator too. Really nicely done. I think that's pretty cool. I got to be honest, I do wish that there were some options for the player characters if you're creating new characters for Darktide Extraction, maybe to made them more exiles or outcasts or rejects, what have you. Maybe even get just a little bit of their background. What happened? Why are they being thrown into this mission and so forth? Now, to start off with, the player characters need to make their way to this cargo elevator, and they will be introduced to the different factions of the Slung and who they might want to affiliate themselves with and who they may want to throw wrenches into the works of others. So when they eventually finally get to the cargo elevator, they find out that the cargo elevator doesn't work. Well, now they got to figure out a way to get it running again. And all throughout this adventure, the player characters are going to find various different allies in some unusual places that they can rely upon depending on the actions that your players end up taking. So once they get the cargo elevator running once again, they are going to experience a crash site from a Valkyrie that was sent prior to them to retrieve this piece of archeotech. And they will find some survivors of that as well, who they may want to bring along with them to assist them in their mission. I got to say, there are a lot of different ways for the Slung to really feel like home for the player characters. I like how it ties in that way, where the players might start to feel some affinity for the people of the Slung. Now, granted, if they're taking their Warhammer 40K really seriously, they've got a mission, and the mission needs to be successful. And for the most part, it may not matter who lives or dies as long as they're able to complete their mission. That is entirely possible. So, throughout this entire adventure, there are decisions which need to be made, which will have long-term effects on what's taking place later on. So eventually, the team will make it to the bottom of the snake stack, and at the bottom, they find this lake of crud and sludge and waste and filth. Got to point out, the lower areas of the snake stack are influenced by Nurgle. So we've got a lot of plague, a lot of disease, we got a lot of mutation. There is also a rebellion going on the planet, and there is the Mobian Sixth, which is a division of Imperial Guard. I know that's not what they're called anymore, but that's how I always refer to them. And they've been corrupted by Nurgle. So those are kind of the ongoing baddies that the player characters are going to be tackling as they're progressing down the snake stack, but they are certainly not the worst of the enemies that they're going to encounter. At the end of the adventure, there is a big bad that the player characters and the people of the slung and other allies the player characters may have made along on the ride are going to have to fight. It is a really big bad. I got to be honest, though, I do feel that the final battle is a little anticlimactic because, strangely enough, the cargo elevator takes a long time to get down to the bottom. So all this adventuring is going on, all these encounters, all these set pieces. There's plenty of downtime for respite for the team. The cargo elevator is returning back to the surface. And by like the third combat round, it's like halfway there. It's like, how fast is this thing moving? Didn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. There are a lot of set pieces, a lot of encounters in here. I do wish we had more maps to kind of lay out the areas that the player characters are going to be traveling through. Or maybe even if we had some sort of a flow chart for each of the chapters, because the player characters are actually traveling these really vast distances, sometimes on a particular level area. And it's a little confusing with how some of it progresses. So, like I said, I would have liked to have seen either maps, and they don't have to be detailed battle maps or anything like that. Just kind of give me a layout of what this area looks like. It's like, okay, here's this encounter, here's that encounter, here's this bounty, so on and so forth. We don't get that. So just to peek through, as far as production quality, it is what we've come to expect now from Cubicle 7 games. Nice, thick paper stock. Artwork throughout is very, very solid, very good for the most part. I will say quite a bit of it is more kind of landscape sort of images like this. A lot of that, not so much kind of action images, but still, like I said, really nicely done throughout. So production quality, very, very good. All right, let's swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts as well as my review score. As far as the adventure itself, I think Darktide Extraction is really cool. I think there's a lot here to really dig, starting with the slung, which is underneath the massive cargo elevator that the player characters have to use to get down to the bottom of the snake stack. And those people are coming along for the ride. There are a lot of different ways for the player characters to improve their reputation with those people. It's entirely possible by the end of the adventure, the player characters feel part of the community and maybe feel responsibility for these people. I dig that a bunch. I like that we've got kind of base building aspect to the cargo elevator and the slung too, that as the adventure progresses, the player characters can improve the defenses and other aspects of both the community and the elevator itself. So I like that. I think there are tons of really cool and unique different set pieces and encounters that are taking place. Like I said, I think the players are going to have an absolute blast with this adventure as long as they have a game master who's staying on top of things. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the critiques I've got. Number one, I do think that players are going to roll up new characters for this short campaign because it doesn't take place in the Gilead system, where the vast majority of the Wrath and Glory published adventures take place. So you're not going to have your players port those characters over to this adventure, I wouldn't think. So they're going to start off with some new characters. And I do wish, even if they were random tables or maybe just a selection of 10 backgrounds you could pick from, that would make the player characters feel more like misfits, outcasts, rejects. We don't have that. Also, I wish we had more maps, even if they were just sort of flowcharts or diagrams to help lay things out for the various different chapters. There are a lot of moving pieces within those. Some things are just kind of hand waved away, which I guess is fine. I don't have an issue with that. But I do think that some game masters could end up kind of having to juggle things around that they shouldn't have to. Things should have been clearer how this linear adventure does progress. It's not terrible. It's not a huge problem. I just think it would have been easier on the game master if we had some maps or diagrams, flowcharts, whatever. Also, as far as combat goes, I think there might be a little too much combat, and I know that's the selling point of Warhammer 40,000 Roleplay Wrath and Glory. But I think by the end of the adventure, with as much combat that's contained within, and then, of course, we've got those various different hazards and bounties, which most of those are going to include combat encounters. I think by the time we hit that 5th chapter, we may have hit a little bit of a slog if you're presenting all of the combat as published in the book. So keep that in mind. I got to be honest, I think the designers themselves realize that maybe by the time you hit chapter 5, that the players will be like, okay, let's bring these proceedings to an end, because there are a lot of optional encounters, and the optional encounters are cool. But we don't have optional encounters really throughout the first 3 chapters of the adventure. It's as we get later on in, you start getting some optional encounters here. Now, some of those are dependent upon actions that the player characters have taken prior to that. I do understand that. I would just trim some of the combat out. That's all I'm saying. But all in all, I think this is a really cool adventure. I think a lot of people are going to dig it. I think the game master has to stay on top of things to really get the most out of this. And there are some things that throughout the adventure, as a GM, you're just going to have to hand wave and go from there. But on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Warhammer 40,000 Roleplay Wrath and Glory Darktide Extraction 8.5 out of 10. I would love to play in this. I think it would be a blast. Of course, now I know what happens, but still, I think I would have a really good time playing in this adventure campaign. All right, that's it for this time out. If you enjoy the Gaming Gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a few ways. First, by utilizing our affiliate links to the One Bookshelf sites, such as DriveThruRPG, and to do so, simply visit thegaminggang.com. Click on one of our banners. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get 5% of that sale as a commission, and all those commissions really do add up and help keep thegaminggang.com around. You can also make a one-time donation by way of PayPal and become a monthly member of our Patreon. You'll find links in the show notes. Also in those show notes, you'll find an invite link to our Discord server. It's absolutely free to sign up, so be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. If you enjoyed the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, be sure to ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central, as I bring you the latest in tabletop role-playing game news and more. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a ton more that you are never going to see here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.